this one, I'm really excited about. Welcome back, all my beautiful, beautiful, beautiful readers, to another book review. And actually, the first review that I've done by request. So, this is just a sign, guys, that if you do actually comment underneath the videos for me to go read anything, I actually go and do it. I will actually go and do it. And on my first video, somebody commented that I should go read The Knights and the Seven Kingdoms. And the reason it's taking me so long to actually read it is because I decided to wait for the series to come out first. So I decided, let me do a series to book analysis kind of thing. Or at least that was the idea I had in my head. But before I even get into it, or into this book, here's a video of my thoughts on the show. Hey future me, here are my thoughts on The Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. I've had a day or two to marinate after finishing the last episode, which thankfully for me, I started the series just as the 5th episode came out, and by the time I was caught up, the 6th episode literally dropped. So that was good timing on my part. But I remember one of the people or the viewers on the first video said something about checking out The Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, and I thought, hey, instead of just diving straight into a George R.R. Martin book, I thought, hey, why not actually just watch the show and then read the book to see if it's changed that much. If it hasn't, I believe the director and George R.R. Martin made a stipulation that, hey, no matter what happens with the show, it's got to be faithful. But really, the show to me is perfect. I think giving us 6 episodes, 30 minutes each, was the perfect combination to introduce us to an amazing depth-filling, complicated characters, to give us this really impactful, depthful, amazing show with so much going on, and yet not so much that it feels that the episodes are extremely packed, extremely congested, and it almost had you wanting more. Literally, by the time I was done with the 5th episode, I had seen conversations online about how this was probably the most perfect story ever. So I almost gave it a 10 out of 10 on IMDb, which apparently, some people didn't like, but I digress. And I have to agree, because that show, start to finish, was perfect. And I know there might be more seasons coming up, etc. But I'm gonna be honest, that show was perfect, and it really made me want to read the book. And so immediately afterwards, I had to take a day to process and let me get myself back in to reading after watching this amazing show, after spending some time studying, writing exams, and finally just get back into what I love by reading an amazing book that gave birth to an amazing show. Future me, did the show match the book? I think what's interesting when books get adapted into shows or movies is you always really have one or two of similar reactions. They're all usually disappointed or it's not faithful to the adaptation, and you kind of have this split down the fan base of people that actually enjoy the fact that the book or the source material is getting adapted into shows. Because obviously a lot of people grow up reading these books or have become integrated into the author's fan base to now actually see your main characters and your favorite universe on screen is a privilege, because obviously not a lot of books, as much as we have so many adaptions these days, not every book and not every universe will get adapted. So it's always split down the middle, because obviously people want to see their books and their source material on TV, but then it's also a thing of it's sometimes difficult to translate what's happening in a book to the screen. And I think most of the time that just incurs or generates disappointment and discontent. Because let's face it, if you read the book and you know the book and you hear that the show is coming out, you know exactly what you're expecting because you love the book so much. You know what moments, what lines, what you know what the character looks like in your head, etc., etc. So it's kind of in a weird way better for you to watch the show or know the show or know the movie first and then read the book, because that way it'll always kind of be better, or seldomly it will most probably be better, because you won't be disappointed because you'll be going from the medium of TV and film and to the source material and realize actually there's a lot more in the source material. That's usually how it goes, right? And I think that's just the best way. So I thought, okay, the show came out. Let me watch the show. 6 episodes, each 30 minutes long. Perfection. Let me just tell you, perfection. But it finished. I got the book. And let me tell you. So the reason I said seldom is because in a weird way, this show did a much better job than the book did. So to give you a bit of background, The Night of the Seven Kingdoms is essentially a compilation or omnibus of a few short stories that George R.R. Martin wrote for Dunk and Egg. Dunk, a hedge knight that has found himself in these peculiar situations with a squire that is actually the heir to the kingdom, or one of the heirs in the royal family to the kingdom. Now, the show adapted the first short story into season 1 of The Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and it actually did a better job than the book. So these are just short stories, and they're really good. For all that they're worth, they are really, really good. But the show does this thing where, and it's kind of also a testament to the director and George R.R. Martin working together, but the show does this thing where they're looking at the characters and they're looking at the lore behind or surrounding the characters, and they're thinking, okay, how can we structure conversations and events that would have happened in the story had the story been maybe a bit lengthened a bit more. So in the show you get a lot more Lionel Baratheon, you get a lot more interactions between the Hassaways, I believe it's, or the Fossaways. You get all these interactions and these conversations between Egg and Dunk that don't happen in the book, because in such a shortened format, you're always gonna lose out somewhere, and it's kind of in a weird way. I don't think it really happens all the time, and in a weird way, season 1 did a much better job adapting the book and giving you these moments that made the story 10 times better. Is the story peak in the book? Absolutely. But there isn't as much emotional or vulnerability, or the circumstances and what is at stake isn't really felt in the book when compared to the show. The show totally blows that out of the ballpark. And it was one of those rare moments where I felt that I could have actually just read the book first, which never really happens because obviously, like I said, the movie comes and usually disappoints after you read the book. But in this case, I really would have just loved to have read the book first and then watched the show, because clearly they, at least for this particular season, they did such a good job that really made the book seem subpar to the show. But to give you a brief summary, this contains a few short stories of Dunk and Egg, who now, once the first season or the first story finishes, Dunk takes Egg permanently underneath his squireship as a hedge knight around the realm. So they go to Dawn, and then as they walk through the kingdoms of the George R.R. Martin world, they run into these different events, these different circumstances that Dunk has to kind of navigate, while also trying to keep everything under wraps, that, he has Egg next to him, somebody that is incredibly important to the realm, but he can't let anybody know, because obviously in a world that is in a medieval universe, whether it be a show, whether it be a book, there's always the case where people take advantage, they take hostage, they murder the the prince or whatever the case is, these things happen. I actually really enjoyed reading this. So I don't know if you paid attention in the other videos. I did say that I do struggle with reading series recently. Like I would do one book and then I'll move on, and then I'll seldom find myself coming back to finish the series. And one of those cases was when I read Game of Thrones. I read that, I loved it, but I even bought the second book, but I never went on to finish reading it, ever. But the universe of Game of Thrones is so big at this point, and the social media real estate that it occupies. There's just so much depth and lore around this universe that I kind of found it more beneficial to do this in a weird way. You don't have to know the main story. You don't have to know anything about Daenerys. You don't have to know anything about the Starks or nothing like that, because this takes place 100 years before the actual story, the main story of Game of Thrones, and it's kind of adding lore and it's world building and all that. And yes, it's tied, and you can see kind of the elements of these stories in and how it impacts the main story, but necessarily it's enlarging the environment and the world that you are now known, you or at least know now about Game of Thrones. Now it's adding that extra layer here, it's adding this extra piece of information there, and it's just making it this bigger, more amazing, beautiful piece of writing to this universe. And that's what I really enjoyed about this. I enjoyed book one, obviously not as much as I enjoyed the series, the season one of the Land of the Kingdoms, but book two with the Red Widow, I enjoyed as well. And when I saw the notification that they're gonna do season two about that specific short story, I was just so happy because I really enjoyed it. And yes, I enjoyed the book three, at least, is obviously the more exciting one. It is literally the second Blackfire Rebellion, and you can see how that could obviously be a bit more exciting than book two compared to book one, and its plot twist and everything like that. But I just loved book two because you never get the sense that Dunk is inevitable. He is too strong for his own good. He's just too good. Yes, you get the notion from the show, from that scene with Jamie looking at the book with the knights in it, and that Sir Duncan the Tall got 3 pages of things he's done, and he's spoken of as this great, amazing knight that has all the strength and all these abilities and is basically untouched, etc., in a lot of aspects. But when you read these stories, he's so human, he's so vulnerable, and he's so prone to mistakes and everything that you can kind of see what happened here. He was a ordinary person that was just trying to be a hedge knight, that circumstances and prophecies and dreams put him in a position where he mattered a lot to the realm. But that didn't make him some immortal hero or godling or anything like that. He was just so Dunk. But what people saw and people seeing his actions and what he did for everybody made him this amazing Sir Duncan the Tall that got 3 pages in the Hall of Fame Night book, basically. But I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed just reading this disconnected but still prominent stories in the world. I enjoyed the bond that Egg and Dunk had. I enjoyed the random lesser lords and lordlings and how their politics, even though they make it seem or everybody in the books and stories make it seem as, okay, little lords and lordlings have their drama and their politics and everything, but the king himself or the people in King's Landing would never get involved because it's their politics. But when you compare their politics to the grand scheme of things, like the king, King's Landing, the hand of the king, etc., it doesn't really register even on their radar. And yet it is so ironic that this book kind of advocates that the fact that those things do matter. These little disputes between little lordlings and stuff like that, and these little tourneys that happen at random villages out in nowhere, whatever the case is, do matter, because that is where the downfall and the uprising of new kings happen. and new dynasties happen. Because spoiler alert, I do really want to talk about this, but spoiler alert if you haven't read the book yet, which you should. Book 3 deals with the Blackfire, the second Blackfire rebellion. So Dunk and Egg are headed to Winterfell. They were headed to serve under the Starks because they want to see the wall. Because that's what Hedge Knight is. It's moving across the land and the realm, being unattached to any specific house or anything. And along the way, they meet John the Fiddler, who is also heading towards the north, but not to the Winterfell, but towards a tourney. And at this tourney, basically, Lord Frey's daughter is getting married to Lord Butterwell, I want to say. Interesting name, I know, but anyways. And the wedding, everything's legit, but it's actually a pretense for all the Blackfire Rebellion sympathizers. So the Blackfires are the bastards of King Aegon, I think. And he was on his deathbed and he had a lot of bastards, and basically he decided, okay, I'm going to legitimize all of them. I'm going to give the family sword, which is Blackfire, I believe, to one of the bastards. And basically this few actions that he did basically started the rebellion. Now, the Blackfires didn't really necessarily want to be underneath the Targaryens anymore. They wanted to be their own. They wanted to take the throne. They wanted to make their own house. They inverted the family crest and all that. And the first Blackfire rebellion happened, and it was before Dunk's time, and it happened in whatever the case is, it finished. It was way before the first story, about like a couple of years before the first short story. But now, here we are in this tourney where there's a dragon egg up for grabs for whoever wins the tourney. And now Dunk wants to participate because he doesn't see the danger in having an egg. Because he speaks to it with Egg, his squire, and he's like, now I have an egg, because every Targaryen, when they are born, they get an egg in their crib. And Dunk hears the story and he hears Egg's warnings, and he hears how this is actually probably a bad idea considering the last time that Dunk went to a tourney, considering who Egg is. Dunk thinks about the food, he thinks about hospitality in this world. When there are weddings and stuff, Hedge Knights and things can come, they can kind of like binge off the hospitality of the Lord and Lordlings, basically get free food and cover under the stars, places to sleep, etc., etc. So Dunk kind of takes advantage of this and he decides to take part in the tourney, and this kind of just magically leads them into kind of tripping and blundering into the second Blackfire Rebellion, where actually this wedding is used as a pretense to bring the sympathizers of the people that failed during the first Blackfire Rebellion. The hostages that were keeping them submissive and underneath the king have now died from the spring disease, and now they feel free to now exact a second rebellion. And here is a second Blackfire, John the Fiddler, who is just naming Blackfire, the second of his name. It obviously doesn't get to the extremeness that the first rebellion got to, but it was such an interesting story to see how the politics is working, how the different processes and practices of weddings and things happen and allow for all these undergoings and under processes that could jeopardize the kingdom itself and all the seven kingdoms itself in an instant, all just happening while there's the joyous wedding happening here. What the circumstances that Dunk faces and everything, and it's really just an accident. They just stumbled on it by accident, but because Bloodraven, the Hand of the King, has so many spies, he's able to identify the threat, and he marches on Whitehall and to stop the rebellion before it even starts. And to actually get to meet him, because obviously there's a lot of fan theories and everything behind Bloodraven, to actually get to meet him was super interesting. I was a bit disappointed because I didn't realize that was going to be the end of the book, because I have seen all these stories and things online about Dunk facing the Laughing Storm as a King's Guard one day. So I don't know where those stories are and where exactly I could find them. But I was really looking forward to maybe reading that story. I would literally give this book about a 9.6, maybe a 9.8. I know it's kind of hard to kind of grade these books because I give a lot of emotional attachment to these books and how they make me feel and how excited, etc., etc. Because I think when I do give ratings and things like that, it always seems to be nines. I think at this point, I don't think I really ever not enjoyed a book enough. I mean, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the only thing that detracts from this book to slightly in against it is the fact that it is short stories. So, you don't get a lot of that emotional investment in what you would get from the show. And the show kind of makes you, the viewer, aware of what could be possible, what you could get. Because there is a lot of lore there. There is a lot of lore about the Red Widow. There is a lot of lore about the Laughing Storm. There is a lot of lore about the Black Fire. But George R. R. Martin doesn't give you the lore as in, here you go. He gives it in the fact that it's stories. These are two traveling people going across the country. And as they go across the country, obviously you hear things, you interact with people, the locals, etc., etc. And through that, that is like a very interesting and beautiful way to kind of introduce you, the reader, to the lore and to the inner workings of this world, because you're not hearing it from the author directly. Like, oh, actually, Damon Blackfire, the second of his name, son of the first Damon. You're not hearing stuff like that, but it is a much better way of doing it because you hear the stories around a campfire. You hear it between conversations of people that need Dunk's help, other hedge knights, other locals, etc., etc. And that's obviously a way, way better job than just giving it to us. But I just thought that the show kind of highlighted what we could have gotten as well. And I think Rick Riordan did something similar as well when he started doing the Disney show for Percy Jackson, which is something he said these books are written in such a long time ago that now when you think about it, or when the author thinks about it, they're like, oh, I could have done this, I could have done that, I could have done etc., etc. And then these shows sometimes give them the opportunity to expand or correct things that they did originally in the book that they've only realized after publishing it. And so the show kind of shows you what you could have gotten. But it is really a good book. I think it's kind of the best thing that you could do if you haven't read the series or the main series before. You start with this, it builds the world. You probably already heard of Game of Thrones to some extent. So you do this, you get the world building, you get the lore and everything, and it's like, oh my gosh. And you can go into the main story, and then you can hear like little comments or little things, little hints of or breadcrumbs of things that wouldn't make sense. But if you maybe read this, it would all make sense because it's now part of a bigger picture, and it's not just the main story and this. But it's definitely kind of motivated me to get into the main story. I do want to finish series, so I definitely want to pick up Game of Thrones again. I definitely want to get into it, and I definitely want to read more of Dunk. I want to find that story. I don't know where the story is, but I'm gonna find it, of him battling the Laughing Storm. I want to see that. I want more Dunk and Egg, so we'll find that. And I think maybe getting into the Game of Thrones series and that range of literary works from George R. R. Martin, even though he'll probably never release the next book. Getting into it might be a little fun thing to do, and we can do it together. I don't know. You guys tell me if you'd like to see a series on the Game of Thrones books, Fire and Blood, etc., etc. But I really enjoyed this, and if you have any recommendations, I do them, I do read them, so please do not hesitate, whether it's classics, non-fiction, poetry, or whatever the case is. If I can read it and try to get into it and see whether it's my thing, I don't mind. Because really, that's what the beauty of books are. If it works for you, it works for you. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But it is something that somebody out there reads, and I'd like to hear your thoughts about it. But if you've watched the series, this is my call out at the end of this video. If you watch the series, tell me what you guys think about the Night of the Seven Kingdoms of the series compared to the book. And I'll catch you guys at the next book review, where hopefully it'll be something special and comment related.